The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow across the empty office. It was well past midnight, and the towering glass building that housed Pinnacle Innovation stood silent, save for the soft hum of a vacuum cleaner weaving through the cubicles. Maria Alvarez, a slight woman with salt and pepper hair tied back in a neat bun, moved with quiet purpose. Her cleaning cart, laden with supplies, squeaked as she pushed it down the hallway, her worn sneakers padding softly against the polished floor. At 48, Maria had cleaned these offices for nearly a decade, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing, sweeping, and wiping away the day's chaos. She didn't mind the work. It was honest, and it kept her son, Mateo, in school, chasing his dream of becoming an engineer. Tonight, though, something felt different. Maybe it was the stillness, heavier than usual, or the faint ache in her knees that reminded her of the years piling up. She paused by a window, catching her reflection in the glass, a silhouette against the glittering cityscape of Chicago. The skyline always took her breath away, even after all these years. It reminded her of the dreams she'd once had, back in Guadalajara, before life had swept her across borders and into this quiet, solitary routine. Maria shook her head, brushing off the nostalgia. She reached for her old portable speaker, a gift from Mateo, and set it on her cart. The office was empty, no one to disturb. She scrolled through her phone, her fingers hesitating before selecting a song. A lively cumbia beat filled the air, the rhythm pulsing through the stillness. Maria smiled. Music had always been her escape, her small rebellion against the grind. She swayed her hips, letting the beat guide her as she dusted a row of desks. Soon, she was spinning, her mop a makeshift partner, twirling through the cubicles with a grace that belied her tired limbs. She laughed softly to herself, lost in the moment, unaware of the figure standing in the shadows of the executive suite. Elliot Grayson, the CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed. At 35, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, a tech prodigy who'd turned a startup into a global powerhouse. His sharp suit was rumpled, his tie loosened after hours of poring over financial reports. He hadn't meant to stay this late, but the board meeting tomorrow loomed like a storm cloud. He'd been pacing his office when the music caught his ear, a sound so out of place in the sterile corporate world he'd built. Curious, he'd followed it, expecting a rogue employee or a security breach. Instead, he found her. Maria spun again, her laughter echoing faintly, and Elliot's lips twitched. There was something disarming about her joy, so unguarded and pure. He'd seen her before, of course, one of the cleaning staff who slipped in and out like ghosts. But he'd never really seen her until now. Her name tag glinted under the lights, Maria. He watched as she danced, her movements fluid and unself-conscious, transforming the mundane into something almost magical. For a moment, he envied her, this woman who found joy in a mop and a song, while he drowned in spreadsheets and shareholder demands. Maria's song ended, and she paused, catching her breath. She switched off the speaker, the silence rushing back like a tide. She didn't notice Elliot as she resumed her work, wiping down a conference table with methodical care. He stepped back into the shadows, his mind racing. He could have left then, returned to his reports, but something held him in place. Maybe it was the contrast, her lightness against his heaviness. Or maybe it was the memory of his own mother, a single parent who'd worked nights as a nurse, humming to herself to get through the long hours. Whatever it was, Elliot couldn't shake the image of Maria dancing. The next morning, the office buzzed with its usual chaos. Employees streamed in, clutching coffee cups and laptops, their voices overlapping in a symphony of deadlines and deals. Maria was long gone, her shift ending at dawn. She was back in her small apartment in Pilsen, cooking breakfast for Mateo before he rushed off to his engineering classes at the community college. She didn't know that Elliot had spent the rest of his night thinking about her, or that he'd pulled up the cleaning staff's records, searching for her file. Maria Alvarez. Hired 9 years ago. No complaints, no absences. A model employee, invisible to most. Elliot leaned back in his chair, staring at her employee ID photo, a serious expression, her dark eyes steady. He wondered what made her dance, what kind of life she led outside these walls. He wasn't sure why it mattered, but it did. Over the next few weeks, Elliot found himself lingering in the office late, hoping to catch another glimpse of Maria. He didn't know what he was looking for, maybe just that spark of joy again. He saw her a few times, always alone, always with her music. She never noticed him, and he never announced himself. It felt intrusive, somehow, to interrupt her private world. But he started noticing other things, the way she'd leave small notes for employees about misplaced items, the way she'd arrange pins neatly on desks, the way she'd hum even when the speaker was off. Small acts of care that no one else seemed to see. One night, as Maria cleaned the break room, she found a wallet tucked under a chair. Black leather, worn but expensive. She opened it, not out of curiosity but to find an ID. Elliot Grayson. Her heart skipped. The CEO. She'd never met him, but his name was a constant hum in the office, whispered in awe or frustration, depending on the day. She slipped the wallet into her cart, intending to drop it at security. But as she pushed her cart toward the elevator, she noticed a folded piece of paper that had fallen out. She picked it up, hesitating. It was a handwritten note, scrawled in hurried ink. Asterisk, call mom. Tell her you're okay. Asterisk. Maria frowned. It was such a human thing, so ordinary, from a man who seemed larger than life. She tucked the note back into the wallet and left it with security, but the words stayed with her. She wondered about this Elliot Grayson, who carried reminders to call his mother. She wondered if he was as untouchable as he seemed. Elliot found the wallet on his desk the next morning, the note still inside. Security mentioned a cleaner had turned it in. Maria. He felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe, or curiosity deepening into something more. He started asking around, discreetly. The facilities manager spoke highly of Maria. She's the best we've got. Never complains, always goes the extra mile. A few employees mentioned her kindness, how she'd once stayed late to help a stressed intern find a lost report, how she'd brought homemade tamales for the night staff during the holidays. Small stories, but they painted a picture of a woman who gave more than her job required. Elliot's life was a world apart from Maria's. He lived in a sleek penthouse downtown, drove a Tesla, and dined with investors at restaurants where a single meal cost more than Maria's weekly pay. But he hadn't always been this way. He'd grown up in a small town in Indiana, raised by a mother who worked double shifts to keep the lights on. Success had pulled him far from that life, but watching Maria stirred memories he'd buried, memories of sacrifice, of love that asked for nothing in return. One evening, as Maria cleaned the executive floor, her phone buzzed. It was Mateo, his voice tight with worry. Ma, the scholarship didn't come through. I don't know how we're going to cover next semester. Maria's heart sank. She'd been counting on that scholarship to ease the burden. Her savings were thin, stretched between rent, bills, and Mateo's textbooks. She told him not to worry, that they'd figure it out, but her voice trembled. After the call, she sat on a bench in the break room, staring at her hands. The music stayed off that night. Elliot, working late again, overheard her conversation through the open door. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but her words hit him hard. He knew what it was like to stare down an uncertain future, to feel the weight of a dream slipping away. He thought about intervening, about writing a check or pulling strings, but he stopped himself. Maria didn't seem like someone who'd want charity. She had pride, the kind that shone through her work, her dancing. Instead, he did something small. He left a note on her cart the next night. Anonymous. Asterisk, you make this place brighter. Thank you. Asterisk. Maria found it during her shift, her brow furrowing as she read it. She looked around, half expecting a prank, but the office was empty. She tucked the note into her pocket, a tiny warmth spreading in her chest. It was the first time in years anyone had acknowledged her beyond a curt nod. The notes continued, appearing every few nights. Your hard work doesn't go unnoticed. Keep dancing. It's beautiful. Maria didn't know who left them, but they became a quiet comfort, a reminder that someone saw her. She started dancing again, her movements lighter, as if the notes had loosened something inside her. Meanwhile, Elliot was grappling with his own challenges. The board was pushing for layoffs to boost profits, a move he'd resisted for months. Pinnacle was thriving, but the pressure to optimize was relentless. He spent sleepless nights weighing numbers against names, profits against people. Maria's file was on the list, her role deemed replaceable by the consultants. The thought made his stomach twist. She wasn't just a name on a spreadsheet. She was the woman who danced, who turned in wallets, who left notes for others without expecting anything back. One night, as Maria cleaned the boardroom, she found a stack of papers left behind after a meeting. She didn't mean to read them, but a bolded word caught her eye: layoffs. Her breath caught as she scanned the page. Her name was there, along with dozens of others, janitors, assistants, entry-level staff. The document outlined cost-saving measures, cold and clinical. Maria's hand shook as she set the papers back in place. She thought of Mateo, of the tuition due, of the life she'd built on this job. She didn't cry, she wasn't the type, but her steps were heavier as she finished her shift. Elliot, working late again, saw her leave the boardroom. Her face was composed, but her eyes were distant, and he knew she'd seen the document. Guilt gnawed at him. He hadn't made the final call yet, but the board was leaning hard. He wanted to say something, to explain, but how could he? He was the CEO, the one with power, and she was Maria, the cleaning lady who danced. The next day, Elliot called an emergency meeting with the board. He argued passionately, citing employee morale, loyalty, the human cost. The board pushed back, but Elliot was relentless. He proposed an alternative, a voluntary pay cut for executives, himself included, to preserve jobs. It was a risky move, one that could have cost him his position, but he thought of Maria, of her notes, of the way she moved through the world with quiet dignity. The board relented, grudgingly agreeing to his plan. Maria didn't know any of this. She went to work that night expecting the worst, bracing for a pink slip. Instead, she found another note on her card. Asterisk, you're staying. We need you. Asterisk, her breath hitched. She looked around, as if the writer might step out of the shadows, but the office was quiet. She clutched the note, her eyes stinging. For the first time in weeks, she turned on her music, letting the cumbia fill the air as she danced, tears mingling with her laughter. The following week, Elliot made a decision. He created a scholarship fund for employees' families, funded by his own bonus. The first recipient was Mateo Alvarez, whose application, submitted anonymously by a concerned colleague, highlighted his academic promise and financial need. When Maria got the news, she collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Mateo hugged her, promising to make her proud, unaware of the quiet figure watching from a distance. Elliot never told Maria he was the one leaving the notes, or that he'd fought for her job, or that he'd funded her son's scholarship. He didn't need to. Watching her dance again, seeing the light return to her eyes, was enough. But Maria, in her own way, gave something back. One night, she left a note on his desk, slipped under a stack of reports. Asterisk, thank you, whoever you are. You've made a difference. Asterisk. The office didn't change much after that. The fluorescent lights still buzzed, the deadline still loomed, and Maria still cleaned. But something shifted, subtle but real. Employees started noticing her more, offering smiles or small talk. The break room stayed tidier, as if people were finally seeing the woman who kept their world in order. And Elliot, for all his wealth and power, found himself lingering late, not for work, but for the faint sound of music drifting through the halls. Maria's dancing became a quiet legend at Pinnacle, whispered about in break rooms and boardrooms alike. No one knew the full story, not the notes, not the scholarship, not the CEO who watched from the shadows. But they felt it, the ripple of kindness that started with a woman who danced when she thought no one was watching, and a man who saw her when no one else did. In a world of spreadsheets and bottom lines, it was a reminder that humanity, in its smallest acts, could still change everything.